Here's a question most people never think to ask. If ancient people were hungry, why would they ever ban a perfectly edible animal? Hunger was common, survival was uncertain, and meat was valuable. Yet again and again, entire civilizations agreed that certain animals were untouchable. Not discouraged, not avoided when convenient, completely off limits. What's more interesting is that these bans appeared in places that had nothing to do with one another and targeted very different animals. Cows in India, horses in Europe, elephants in Asia, cats in Egypt, dogs in multiple societies. If taste wasn't the reason, then what was? This episode exists for people who enjoy pulling apart everyday assumptions and finding the deeper logic underneath. And if that sounds like you, subscribing now quietly ensures you'll keep getting this kind of thinking without having to search for it. Let's get straight into it, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Food taboos usually began as practical rules long before they became moral ones. Early civilizations didn't have the luxury of waste. Every animal required land, water, labor, and time. When an animal played a critical role outside of being food, eating it became a risk to the entire system. The fastest way to enforce that rule wasn't constant policing. It was belief. By attaching sacred meaning, legal punishment, or social shame to an animal, societies ensured long-term compliance. Over generations, the reason faded, but the rule hardened. What started as a survival strategy slowly became tradition. You know, cows were actually banned because they kept societies alive long after the meal was over. In ancient agrarian societies, especially in South Asia, cows were real economic engines. They ploughed fields, produced milk, fertilized soil, and even fueled fires with dried dung. Killing a cow for meat, sure, it provided a short burst of calories, but it destroyed years of future productivity. As populations grew, protecting cattle became absolutely essential. Turning cows into sacred animals wasn't about sentimentality. It was structural. A society that ate its working animals, well, it collapsed faster than one that didn't. The religious framing made sure that even during famine, people resisted the temptation to destroy the very system that fed them. Elephants, on the other hand, were protected because they were instruments of power, not livestock. In many Asian civilizations, elephants were never seen as food animals. Instead, they were tools of state power. Elephants cleared forests, transported massive loads, built infrastructure, and dominated battlefields. A single trained elephant was worth more than hundreds of meals. Eating an elephant wasn't just wasteful. It was honestly dangerous to the state. That's why only rulers controlled them, and, harming one often carried severe punishment. Over time, elephants became symbols of royalty, wisdom, and divine authority, reinforcing their protected status long after their military role declined. Horses were banned because, honestly, speed and mobility decided survival. Before engines and railroads, horses were everything. They determined how fast armies moved, how trade flowed, and how information spread. Societies that preserved their horses dominated those that didn't. In much of Europe and Central Asia, eating horses was strongly discouraged or outright forbidden, especially during periods of expansion and warfare. Religious authorities often reinforced these bans, but the original motivation was, well, pretty simple. A society that eats its transportation becomes slow, vulnerable, and isolated. Cats were protected because, well, they guarded the food supply itself. In ancient Egypt, cats weren't revered just because they were mysterious or elegant. They were essential, plain and simple. Grain storage was really the backbone of the economy, and rodents were a constant threat. Cats protected food from destruction, indirectly preventing famine. Killing a cat endangered far more than just one animal. It threatened the survival of households and entire communities. Elevating cats into religious symbols, well, that ensured they were protected absolutely. By the time their sacred status was fully established, the practical reason had already done its job. Dogs were banned because they blurred the line between labour and kinship. Dogs occupy a unique place in human societies. They hunt, guard, herd and protect. In cultures where dogs were critical working partners, eating them disrupted social order. You don't consume something that stands between you and danger. That's why, in many societies, dogs were treated as extensions of the household rather than livestock. Consuming them felt like crossing a boundary that weakened trust, security and cooperation. In cultures where dogs didn't serve these roles, the taboo often never formed. These bans survived because, well, identity outlives necessity. Once an animal taboo becomes embedded in religion or culture, it stops being about practicality. It becomes about who you are. People don't defend these rules because they understand the original logic. They defend them because breaking them feels like erasing history. This is why food taboos provoke such strong reactions even today. You're not questioning a diet. You're questioning continuity, belonging, and meaning. What these ancient bans still teach us today is, well, kind of surprising. Modern societies still do the same thing, just with different language. We protect endangered species. We regulate fishing. We ban hunting certain animals. The reasoning hasn't changed. We restrict what threatens long-term stability and protect what sustains it. Ancient civilizations didn't ban animals randomly. They identified what held their world together and built rules to defend it. If this kind of deeper explanation helps you see everyday rules in a new way, take a moment to subscribe and share this with someone who enjoys understanding how human societies actually worked beneath the surface. Simple things are rarely simple, and that's what makes them worth explaining.